The wind howled as if the night itself was alive, whispering secrets only the darkness could understand. The towering mansion stood at the edge of Black Hollow, a forgotten relic of time, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the abyss. People in town spoke of it in hushed voices, stories of disappearances, strange lights flickering in the dead of night, and shadows that moved on their own. No one dared to stay there. No one except for me. Started as a dare. My friends laughed at the idea, waving their hands dismissively. No one lasts an entire night in there, they said. People either run out screaming or they never come out at all. I didn't believe in ghosts, nor did I think a house could be cursed. It was just old, forgotten, and drowning in local legends. The perfect place to prove them wrong. So, with only my flashlight, a backpack, and my phone to document everything, I walked through the rusted iron gates and toward the mansion's looming entrance. The air grew thick with a damp, decayed scent. The moment I stepped inside, the door creaked open by itself, as if welcoming me. A wave of icy air swept through, sending a chill down my spine. Dust swirled in the glow of my flashlight, revealing a grand staircase, portraits with faces too faded to recognize, and a long hallway that stretched into darkness. The silence wasn't normal. It was too quiet. Even the wind outside had stopped. I took a slow breath and started recording. "All right, here I am," I whispered to the camera. "A night in the most haunted house. Let's see if this place really lives up to the stories." I moved deeper inside, my footsteps echoing on the cracked wooden floor. The living room was frozen in time. Old furniture covered in white sheets, a fireplace filled with ashes long gone cold, and an antique piano with keys yellowed by age. But it wasn't just the stillness that felt wrong. It was the feeling of being watched. The floor creaked behind me. I spun around, my flashlight shaking slightly in my grip. "Nothing." Forced a chuckle. "Old houses make noise," I muttered, convincing myself more than anything else. But then, it happened again. Another creak. This time closer. My heart pounded as I swept the flashlight around. The portraits on the walls seemed different. Their faces were clearer now. Eyes sunken, mouths slightly open as if whispering. I swallowed hard. It was just my imagination. Had to be. I continued down the hall, passing a tall antique mirror. My reflection moved half a second too late. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Was that real? No. Maybe the glass was just old, distorted. But as I turned away, I caught a glimpse of something behind me. A dark silhouette. I whirled around. The hallway was empty. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. The stories weren't feeling so ridiculous anymore. Still, I forced myself to keep going, pushing open a door at the end of the hall. The bedroom was untouched. The four-poster bed was still made. A vanity table sat with a single chair pulled out, and a wardrobe loomed in the corner, its doors slightly ajar. A journal lay open on the nightstand, its pages yellowed and curling at the edges. I picked it up, running my fingers over the fragile paper. The handwriting was elegant but hurried. "He watches from the mirrors. Do not look too long." A chill ran down my spine. I turned to the vanity mirror, my own reflection staring back at me. But then, for a split second, my reflection didn't blink. The journal slipped from my hands. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. It was just a trick of the light. Had to be. But then, the wardrobe creaked open. The darkness inside was too deep, too empty. A whisper drifted from within, soft and urgent. "He knows you're here." Ran. Bolting from the room, I sprinted down the hall, back toward the main entrance. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door loomed ahead, my escape. But as I reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. I yanked harder. A whisper slithered through the air behind me. "You shouldn't have come." My flashlight flickered. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as the shadows stretched toward me. The air grew thick, suffocating. Then I heard it. A step. Low. Deliberate. Getting closer. I turned, pressing my back against the door, my flashlight barely holding the darkness at bay. The hallway was empty, at first. Then, out of the blackness, something stepped forward. A tall, hollow-eyed figure, its skin stretched too tightly over its bones. Its mouth curved into an unnatural grin, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too wrong. Reached out, and the light went out. The last thing I heard before everything turned to black was my own scream. The darkness swallowed me whole. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was thick, suffocating, pressing against my skin like a second layer. My breath came in ragged gasps as I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands trembling. Blick. The beam flickered on for a brief second, revealing the thing standing inches away from me. Its grin stretched wider than humanly possible, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. A bony hand reached for my face. And then the light died again. A rush of icy wind blasted through the hallway, and suddenly the pressure vanished. The air lightened. I gasped, my body trembling violently. My flashlight flickered back to life on its own, and I found myself alone. The figure was gone. I bolted away from the door, my mind screaming at me to escape, but I knew I was trapped. The front door wouldn't open, and I wasn't about to test my luck breaking a window. Not when the house itself seemed to be playing with me. There had to be another way out. I stumbled down a side corridor, my light cutting through the suffocating darkness. The house felt bigger now, as if the hallways stretched longer than they should. My own footsteps echoed strangely, like they weren't entirely mine. Then I saw it, an old wooden staircase leading down. Basement. I hesitated. Every horror instinct in my body told me not to go down there. But the only way out had to be through the house's foundation. Maybe an old storm door, a broken window, something. Taking a deep breath, I descended. The stairs creaked under my weight, dust swirling with each step. The air turned damp, carrying the scent of mold and something rotting. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I reached the bottom. The basement was vast, lined with old shelves filled with decayed books, broken furniture, and rusted tools. But what caught my attention was a row of mirrors lining the far wall. They weren't covered in dust like everything else. They were spotless. I approached cautiously, the hairs on my arms standing on end. The reflections stared back at me. But then I noticed something was wrong. I wasn't alone in them. In the mirror behind my reflection stood the thing. It was watching me. My breath hitched as I turned around. Nothing. I looked back at the mirror. The figure still stood there, grinning. And then, slowly, it raised its hand. So did my reflection. But I hadn't moved. My heart slammed against my ribs. My reflection, no, the thing pretending to be me, smiled wider, its mouth stretching too far, teeth sharp and unnatural. Its eyes darkened, hollow pits forming where pupils should have been. Then it stepped forward. Out of the mirror. I stumbled back, a strangled scream escaping my throat. The figure, now free, loomed over me, its form flickering between my shape and something else. Something wrong. "You don't belong here," it whispered, its voice crawling under my skin. "But you will soon." The lights flickered violently. The mirrors shattered all at once, the sound like 1,000 screams echoing through the basement. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, pulling me downward. And then I was falling. Darkness swallowed me whole again. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. Gasping, I scrambled up, my hands landing on something. Soft. Fabric. Blanket. Confused, I looked around. I wasn't in the basement anymore. I was in a bedroom. The same bedroom I had found earlier. The same bed. The same journal on the nightstand. Everything was exactly as it had been before. Had I imagined it? Had I blacked out? I reached for my phone. The screen was still recording, but the battery was somehow full. I checked the timestamp. It hadn't moved. It was still the exact moment I had started recording hours ago. The realization settled into my bones like ice. Time wasn't moving. Something was wrong with the house. Creaks sounded behind me. Turned slowly. The wardrobe. The doors were wide open now. And inside, shrouded in darkness, were two glowing eyes staring right at me. Then the whisper came again. "You are home now." The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was the door slamming shut. I couldn't breathe. The darkness wrapped around me like a living thing, pressing against my skin, tightening around my throat. I clawed at the air, my pulse hammering in my ears. The whisper from the wardrobe still lingered, curling into my mind like smoke. "You are home now." I forced myself to move, to do something, anything to break free from this nightmare. My fingers scrambled against the walls, searching for a light switch, a door handle, a way out. Then suddenly, the darkness peeled away. I was no longer in the bedroom. I was outside. Cold air slapped my face. I gasped, my breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. The mansion stood in front of me, silent and towering beneath the moonlight. The front door was shut. The windows were dark. Had I escaped? I took a step backward, my mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. The mirrors, the basement, the thing that looked like me. Had it all been real? Then I noticed something. My phone was still in my hand. Trembling, I lifted it. The screen was still recording. With shaky fingers, I hit stop and opened the video. The timestamp was frozen at the exact moment I had started recording inside the house. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the footage. The first few seconds looked normal. Me walking into the house talking to the camera. Then things started to shift. The images glitched, the screen flickering with bursts of static and shadow. And then, I wasn't there anymore. The hallway was empty. The camera had kept recording, but I was gone. Cold dread settled into my bones. Had I blacked out? Had I vanished? Then the static cleared. Something else stood in the footage. Something that looked like me. But it wasn't. Turned toward the camera. Its smile was too wide. Its eyes were hollow voids. It waved at the screen, tilting its head unnaturally. Then it whispered, "You left. But you never really left." My stomach twisted. I dropped the phone, my entire body trembling. This wasn't over. I turned, ready to run, to get as far away from this cursed place as possible. But then I froze. A figure stood at the edge of the woods, watching me. Unmoving. Looked just like me. And then, it smiled. The last thing I heard before the world blinked to black was my own voice whispering, "You are home now."